is we put on a festival called Playground. Here at Playground, we cancel classes for the whole week, and we put up plays and performances over the course of the whole week. So in December, I produced and wrote and directed a play called Another Star. This play was a murder mystery set in the basement of a Nigerian church, and I took it as an opportunity to share aspects of my culture with my CMU community and give a space for the Black actors at my school to have room to collaborate. Even though our time working on this project was short, it was so beautiful. I love every aspect of creating theater. And one thing that you have to do when it comes to creating theater is consume it. They say that the greatest artists steal, and so last summer, I found myself in the audience of a play called Scenes for an Execution. This play, set in the 16th century, features Galatea, a painter who was commissioned by the Doge and the Catholic Church to paint a picture of the beautiful Battle of Lepanto. This painting is so gory and violent that it drives people to vomit. People are brought to amazement and tears. It ends up asking us how we, as artists, should respond to censorship and how we should respond to images that stir up these deep responses in us. I found it so interesting that we, as the audience of this play, never actually end up seeing the picture, so we're left wondering what images the characters in this play are witnessing. The other thing that I began to think about after the play's conclusion was the power of art, how the use of violence within art, either through its implication or its actual execution, could stir up deep, visceral, emotional responses. I began to think about The Amen Corner by James Baldwin. This is one of my favorite plays because I used a monologue from it to audition for my high school. The year that I got into my high school, the Shakespeare Theater Company actually put up a production of it, and I just knew that I had to go and drag my mom to go see it. This play is about Margaret, a pastor from 1954, a female pastor whose religious and righteous facade begins to fall apart when her jazz-playing husband comes back. Her church, her congregation begins to betray her, and she's subject to misogyny and all kinds of religious abuse. I remember feeling so excited watching this play because me and my mom were able to have a beautiful conversation about our religion and our faith. A conversation that we never would have had if not for this play. I think about Medea. Medea is a Greek tragedy that I had to read for my freshman year theater history course. Medea is about this guy named Jason who ends up leaving his wife, Medea, to socially climb. Medea is ultimately tries to get her revenge, and the way that she does this is by slaughtering her own children and then escaping conveniently by dragon-drawn carriage. One of the questions that I had to ask myself after reading that play was, why doesn't Medea kill her children on the stage? My teacher brought to my attention the importance of the imagination. How audiences could dream up things more visceral, more violent than anything that we could feasibly present on this theater stage. I think about Walk. I was recently invited to see a production of Walk, written by Manuel Oliver. To be so real, I was absolutely dreading watching this show, especially because the performer was the father of one of the victims of the Parkland shootings. And I was so anxious about what I would be getting into when I walked into that theater. What I found so beautiful about the show, though, was that it wasn't a walk through the moments of every event of that tragedy, but it was a celebration of his son's life. And only for a brief moment at the end do we, as the audience, interact with the violence that his son was subject to. This is what I find so powerful about theater. When I left that theater, I was full of so much guilt. I realized that I had grown so passive about the topic of school shootings because I graduated from high school and I guess I thought it didn't occur to me. I began to think about all the adults in my life who'd grown up in a life where school shootings were a looming threat that dawned on them every time they went to school. And I began to wonder what it must have felt like for them to interact with this play, to interact with someone who had actually been a victim of this travesty. Theater has the power to bring you into conflict with things that you've been avoiding, with things that you might not have ever heard of. On the other hand, when we think about journalism, specifically photography and videography, those things have changed the way that we interact with violence on a day-to-day basis. If you look at the Vietnam War, images from this war completely changed the way that we as Americans perceived our actions in war. It inspired protest. It was the scarcity of these images that brought to attention our participation and the ways that we harm other people and widened our attention outside of the scope of our own individual lives. Now we have cameras in our pockets. Both bystander and body cam footage have completely changed the way that we think about police brutality. Last year, you couldn't scroll on Instagram or TikTok without encountering a GoFundMe. Bodies burning in Gaza, the house fires in LA. We are watching people's last moments be broadcast to us on a daily basis. We see this in between our dance challenges and post-surrealist memes. We are not meant to live like this. We are not meant to consume content mindlessly and feel so overwhelmed and so numb to the massive scope of human suffering that we're constantly interacting with. This is called desensitization, and studies are still being done on the effects of desensitization and the ways that it prevents us from internalizing traumas that happen to us, and the ways that it contributes to violence in adolescence. But I propose two solutions. See, I'm an artist and I'm an audience member. So, no matter what app you choose to use, we are subject to the whim of algorithms. What if we, as artists, begin to create art not just to satisfy an engine that doesn't reward us for the content or the quality of the work that we're putting out? What if we create not just for the audiences that we have, but for the audiences that we want? What if we choose to create work that investigates the violence that we're subject to on a daily basis? This is something that I want to do and am actively trying to do. When I wrote Another Star, I recognized a need. I thought about the roles that women play in churches. I thought about the Amen Corner. I thought about a girl named Io. I thought about her choir group and what it would feel like for all 5 of those characters to interact with each other. What it would feel like for her to be subject to misogyny and experience all of those things and walk through her life. Another Star is a murder mystery, so Io ends up dying at the end of the play because of misogyny and jealousy and lust. And as I was directing and writing the play, I had to think about what I wanted the most important, most memorable moment, most memorable image of my play to be. Did I want it to be an angry black man brutalizing a black woman on stage? Would that really get my point across? Or would that just hurt my actors in my community? I thought about what it would look like for her murderer to beg for forgiveness and not to get an answer. I thought about what it would look like to investigate guilt and shame and have nothing but silence on stage except for him. On the other hand, as an audience member, as a human being, what if we began to look beyond the scope of our phones, this reality that convinces us that the only way that we can have an impact is by doing some huge, big, grandiose gesture? What if it's in actually having a conversation with the person checking out at the grocery store? Or handing $5 to that unhoused person on the street? What if it's a more personal thing? What if it's in watching that cringy movie with your friend because you know they need company? Or in just spending time with someone when you know that they need help? Or what if it's just a habit thing? What if it's in setting a limit in how much time we scroll on these apps that keep us trapped in this virtual reality? We as people are meant to feel things. And when we feel those things, express them through dialogue, through art. The power is in our hands. I'm calling all of you here today to be present with one another, to consume art intentionally, and to create art intentionally.